There is a moment when you realize you are being lied to. For Sarah, it was standing in a sterile, white hospital room, listening to a doctor say the words that would change everything. For weeks, the staff at her mother's nursing home had been telling her that her mother's confusion, her exhaustion, her fading away was just a normal part of getting older. They smiled. They patted her arm, and they told her to accept it. But it wasn't old age. It was a fatal error. This is the story of Eleanor Vance. It's the story of how a common, treatable infection became a death sentence because the people paid to care for her dismissed her life as already over. And it's the story of how a family had to fight through a wall of indifference to uncover a truth they tried to bury with her. Before she became a statistic, Eleanor Vance was the heart of her family. At 78, she was fiercely independent. She lived in the same house for 50 years, the one where she raised her 2 children. Her garden was her pride, and her grandchildren were her joy. She was a force. Her daughter Sarah remembers. Even after Dad passed, she was so resilient. She had her routines, her friends, her book club. She wasn't just an old woman. She was my mom. She was still her. But a minor fall while gardening, just a twisted ankle and a bruised hip, shattered the family's sense of security. The thought of her alone, unable to reach a phone, became a fear they couldn't ignore. We had that really hard conversation, Sarah says. The one nobody wants to have. She didn't want to be a burden. And we just wanted her to be safe. We researched places for weeks. We visited 5 different facilities. They chose Maple Creek Senior Living. It had gleaming floors, a friendly marketing director, and a brochure filled with smiling residents. It promised compassionate, 24-hour care and peace of mind. It looked perfect, Sarah says. They said all the right things. We treat them like our own family. We trusted them. We put the most precious person in our world into their hands. Looking back, that trust was the biggest mistake of our lives. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. Eleanor was adjusting. She complained about the food, which, to Sarah, was a good sign. It meant the fire was still in her. But then, a subtle shift began. I'd visit after work, and she'd be sleeping in her chair, Sarah recalls. At first, I thought, okay, she's adjusting. It's tiring. But it became, every time, she seemed more distant. When Sarah would ask the nurses, she was met with a ready-made answer. Oh, that's just part of the aging process. She's 78. A little confusion is to be expected. These phrases, spoken with placid authority, became a wall. In elder care, old age is often used as a catch-all diagnosis, a convenient explanation that can mask a multitude of sins. For Eleanor, it was masking a developing crisis. The staff noted her increased lethargy and confusion, but instead of looking for a root cause, they treated the symptom. They recommended a new anti-anxiety drug to help with her agitation. This is a scenario played out in facilities across the country. Instead of asking, why, a resident is confused, the easier path is often to medicate. This practice, known as polypharmacy, the use of multiple drugs at once, is a minefield for the elderly. Studies show that a significant percentage of residents in long-term care facilities are exposed to medication errors, with some estimates indicating that up to 27% have been victims. For Eleanor, this new pill wasn't just unnecessary, it was a step toward disaster, adding another layer of fog to her mind. Over the next month, Eleanor's condition worsened dramatically. The vibrant woman who moved into Maple Creek was fading into a ghost of herself. The confusion got so much worse, Sarah says. She'd call me by my aunt's name. Sometimes she wouldn't seem to recognize me at all. She stopped eating much. She lost weight. I could see it in her face, in the way her clothes hung on her. Every time Sarah raised the alarm, she was met with the same placating smiles. The staff's notes began to reflect a chilling new narrative. Resident exhibiting signs of sundowning. Family is having difficulty accepting residents' cognitive decline. The problem, they implied, wasn't Eleanor's deteriorating health. It was Sarah's inability to accept it. It's a tactic, conscious or not, that isolates families and weaponizes their love against them. It can make you feel like you're going crazy. What the staff was dismissing as dementia were, in fact, classic symptoms of a severe underlying infection. In older adults, a simple urinary tract infection, UTI, often doesn't present with the usual signs of pain. Instead, it can manifest as acute confusion, delirium, lethargy, and behavioral changes. It's one of the most common and most commonly missed diagnoses in the elderly. If left untreated, a UTI can quickly escalate into sepsis, a life-threatening medical emergency where the body's overwhelming response to infection leads to tissue damage, organ failure, and death. The key to survival is early detection. But at Maple Creek, each reassuring, "This is just old age," was another tick of a clock counting down to a fatal outcome. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah arrived to find her mother's room empty. She found an aide down the hall. I asked where my mom was. The aide just said, "Oh, she wasn't feeling well, so we put her back to bed." So casual. I ran to her room, and she was barely responsive. Her skin was clammy. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. The calm facade of Maple Creek shattered. Sarah demanded they call an ambulance. They actually hesitated, she says, her voice still shaking with the memory. One of the nurses said they needed to call the on-call doctor first to get approval. I just screamed at her, "If you don't call 911 right now, I will." I think that's the first time they realized I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. At the hospital, the truth came crashing down. An ER doctor took one look at Eleanor, ran immediate tests, and came back with a grim face. He asked how long she had been so confused. "Weeks," Sarah told him. He asked if the nursing home had tested for a UTI. Sarah had no idea. He just shook his head. "Your mother is in septic shock," he said, "resulting from a raging, untreated urinary tract infection. Her kidneys are failing." It wasn't dementia. It wasn't old age. It was a common, treatable infection that had been allowed to fester for weeks. The facility's failure to perform a simple urine test had brought her mother to the brink of death. In that moment, all my grief turned into rage, Sarah says. They didn't just miss it. They ignored me. They wrote her off. They decided she wasn't worth the effort of a simple test. They let her die in slow motion. And they told me I was just being an emotional daughter. Eleanor Vance passed away 36 hours later. The official cause of death was multi-organ failure due to septic shock. For her family, the grief was compounded by a burning sense of injustice. Sarah's request for her mother's medical records was met with delays and stonewalling. When she finally got them, huge sections were missing. The daily nursing notes from the weeks she was most concerned were gone. She soon realized she couldn't fight this battle alone and contacted a lawyer specializing in nursing home negligence. The legal team subpoenaed the complete, unredacted records. They uncovered a portrait of systemic failure, evidence of chronic understaffing, a factor directly linked to increases in neglect and medical errors, and proof that many staff members lacked adequate training on identifying atypical infections in the elderly. The most damning evidence was an internal email. A week before Eleanor's hospitalization, a junior aide had noted Eleanor's confusion and suggested to a supervisor they check for a UTI. The supervisor's emailed response was a single, chilling sentence. "Resident has a history of dementia. Monitor for now." That email. It proved everything, Sarah says. It wasn't an oversight. It was a conscious decision. They chose the easier diagnosis. They diagnosed her with old and gave her a death sentence. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Maple Creek's parent company chose to settle out of court. The settlement included financial compensation and, more importantly to Sarah, a mandate that the company implement a new training program on infection identification across all of its facilities. "The money means nothing," Sarah says. "I would give it all back just to have one more conversation with my mom. The real mom. The one they took from us long before she actually died. But the training, that feels like something. If her story can save even one other family from going through this hell, then her death won't be completely in vain. Eleanor's story is a stark illustration of a terrifying reality. The dehumanizing assumption that confusion, pain, and decline are simply part of being old is not a diagnosis. It is a form of neglect. This hidden epidemic of neglect thrives in silence. If you have a story, if you've seen a loved one's concerns dismissed, share your experience. You are not alone. By sharing these stories, we can expose a broken system. By demanding dignity, accountability, and justice for our most vulnerable, we can shine a light into the shadows. The fatal error in Eleanor Vance's care wasn't just a single missed test. It was a cascade of failures, all stemming from a fundamental, corrosive belief. It was the failure to listen to a daughter, the failure to investigate a clear change in condition, the failure to look past a number on a chart and see a human being. They called it old age, but it was negligence. They called it a peaceful passing, but it was a preventable death. Eleanor's story is a painful lesson. Trusting our loved ones to a system is not enough. We must be vigilant. We must be demanding. We must be their fiercest advocates. Because the moment we accept that it's just old age is the moment we allow the most fatal error of all to occur. It's the error of giving up. And for the people we love, that is never an option.